mainly for the YouTube. And then I'll let you share. Okay, so this is the third lecture for our lecture series. Obviously, it's been welcome. Just some quick announcements. We started our our website changes. The next lecture is this Saturday at 3. Ozzy's going to be talking about his thesis and other stuff. If you want to sign up, yeah, and then send your work to that email. We have a members gallery. We're trying to form a collection of work. Just so that when we have however many members, we can see all the work, in one place. And then same kind of slide, just said a different way. Join. Send an email to that email if you want to join. We're trying to essentially just create a union of young, passionate architects, artists, people that make stuff, because we can't live in a vacuum, and we all need to come together and do something great. We have a house competition going on right now. It'll end in March of 2025. We have a pretty cool jury. So you don't have to do anything crazy, but you should. We'll have a big Zoom call with these people at the end in March, where you can, hear from them and, hopefully get some good critique, but it's just also a good opportunity for us to kind of get our hands dirty and start seeing what this group really wants to be. So anyway, you guys are all here obviously for Ben's lecture. So I thought I'd just introduce him. So many people in the call and people that are listening on YouTube have had Ben, and many people have heard about Ben and what he's doing, and that's why we're all here and listening. He's currently a professor at Virginia Tech. Recently finished his first new construction house, biggest project. I'm sure he'll be talking about that tonight.
Wow, Ben got a freaking...
Yo, Ian, turn your thing off, bro.
Oh, my bad. What's up, guys?
Bro.
Are you drinking right now?
Ian, no. Come on, man. And so he taught at South Dakota before this. Went to grad school at GSD and undergrad at Cal Poly. He's doing some pretty insane stuff. So we're very thrilled to hear from him. It's a pleasure. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Ben to start the lecture.
Okay. Thank you, Seth, for inviting me.
Yeah.
Screen mode. So it says my screen sharing is paused. Does that mean something? Resume. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can. You just need to go into presentation mode. I don't know if that's a thing. Can you are you like zoomed in?
This is old school, like troglodyte, like idiot COVID Zoom situation.
Yeah.
It says my screen sharing is paused. I'm concerned about that.
Hold on. Try sharing again.
Okay, let's see here.
There we go.
Okay, it looks good.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So okay. Yes, my name is Ben. I really admire what you're doing, everyone here. When I graduated, I felt like kind of a lone wolf. there isn't much of a community I found outside of school. And so it really takes an effort to maintain communication. And I think it's very important because there's a I'm an egotistical maniac, of course, and I just think it maintains that little bit of a competitive edge. What's so and so doing? What's so and so doing? Also, you get like critiqued and feedback on like what you're doing, and that is like so critical in school. So, um, yeah, I'm really hoping that this like blossoms. I feel like maybe you guys will form like a reading group or something too. Um, so I assume that most people have seen my work, and so I thought I would show the work, but that I would also include a lot of construction photos. And since I don't have Instagram and post a lot of iPhone pictures of things that I'm working on, I figured that I would basically show that today, kind of, except for this goes back a long, long time. So this is the first egg chair that I made. It's a picture of it. Um, I was in my second year, and I'm a very materialistic person. Um, I really wanted a PlayStation when I was younger. I just desperately wanted it. And I felt like as soon as I got a PlayStation, my life would be perfect. And then I desperately wanted a truck. And I felt like if I got a truck, my life would be perfect. And I'm a very materialistic person. That's just how I'm programmed. I don't know why, but I really like things and I like acquiring things. Um, I don't know if I'm going to, when I'm dead, I think I'll probably reincarnate as a person. I don't think I'm going to be plucked out of this awful third dimension. I think I'm going to remain here because I'm so materialistic. But I like designing things and building things because I want them. I want them. I want to hold the thing that I make. I want to like look at the thing that I make. I want to touch the thing that I make. I want to like eat the thing that I make. I want to like, I just want to just like, I want the thing. I want it. Um, when I was a student and I made models, I wanted the model. It's like a toy. I wanted the toy. And um, the exact toy thing didn't exist in the world, so I had to like make it myself. Anyway, so I wanted an egg chair. And so I made this egg chair. And 3 years later, there was a second iteration of it, and it looked like this. Um, it's quite a bit different. Um, okay, so the first one was kind of a disaster for a lot of reasons. And I'll explain. And the second one was not really a disaster. And it's because I had a greater understanding of like the material that I was going to work with. And there was a greater sense of like elegance. The first one was like a pure product of my imagination, kind of, and it just had no basis or direction. And the second one was a very, very, very direct copy of two chairs. And that's why it was great, basically. So the first one is the Arnie Jacobson egg chair, and the resemblance is uncanny. And that's because I found a 3D mesh of this chair and then rebuilt it as a NURB surface and then, tweaked it. And then also the second chair is this chair here, which is a Wes Jones chair. Wes Jones was a partner of my undergraduate thesis advisor. His name was Doug Jackson. And they were inspired by hot rods and this idea of supercharging everything. So Wes Jones, in an era of like postmodernism, that is riffing on on modernism and poking fun at it, he takes the Le Corbusier chaise lounge chair and then builds this hydraulic dinosaur freight loader thing. So it's a supercharged Le Corbusier chair. And I was in love with it. I love that aesthetic. I absolutely love it. I love the heaviness of it. I love the kind of intimidation of it. I love the strength of it. It doesn't look flimsy. It looks like you would, hit it with a concrete truck and it would probably survive. Okay, so back to the first egg chair. It looked like this. I wanted to experiment with a CNC machine, and it just occurred to me it's the same color as the chairs in the studio. So I've lined it with this fabric, and then I spray foamed the bottom, and then I had just seen, pictures of Gary's Bilbao project that was made with Zahner panels in a fish scale pattern. And so I thought, how can I get my project to look like panels? How do you apply like an even surface to a doubly curved thing? And I had the idea of taking Coors Light cans, which have this uniquely blue tint to them. And so these are all beer cans. So drank a lot of beer and cut the bottom and the top off and then folded it. And it was this excruciating process. It was a lot of extremely dumb labor. And dumb labor means that your final product is going to look like it is the result of dumb labor. There's a real lack of precision. And the beer cans were held with tape and hot glue, and it was just kind of a disaster. The thing looked like this, and it sat on this weird stand thing. I had this idea that it would pivot on this ball. Can you see my mouse? Okay. I had this idea that it would kind of pivot for some reason, which it did. And it had a little radio transponder here. Actually, it wasn't a radio. What it was just an audio amplifier that would connect to like your phone. And for some reason, I guess the egg chair had so much metal in it that literally when you would turn on the amplifier, it would, I'm not kidding, pick up a radio frequency and it would play, I can't remember what it was. It was like some like Spanish radio station. It's kind of insane. But the execution was ambitious, but it was sloppy. And the design was just, I don't know how else to put it. It was ugly. One thing I will say is that it did get finished. I don't know. I'm somebody who, even if the idea gets a little bit sour, even if I dislike the thing, even if I have a lot of doubts, I generally finish the thing. And I'm also kind of not afraid to, I guess, like take risks. I don't really know what I was risking by making this. I wasn't risking my health. But I risked not finishing it, I suppose, owing to its complexity. Boy, oh boy, I'm going to talk about this ugly project for 20 minutes, you guys. Let me set an alarm so this doesn't go on forever. Okay. let's see here. All right. So back to the second egg chair. I knew I wanted greater precision, elegance, etc. So I made the whole thing out of CNC milled foam. I didn't have a robot arm, and the final surface was very complex. So I sliced it into these 3-inch modules and had a waffle grid made out of wood. And then I put the little modules in the wood, and then I put um, gallons of putty spackle on it. And then I put 2 layers of fiberglass on the top and 1 layer of fiberglass on the bottom. And then I put a tremendous amount of Bondo on it. And the process still required an unbelievable amount of dumb labor. But there was unquestionably greater precision involved here. So here we see the construction of the thing with this wooden core, and then this foam shell, well, now foam and fiberglass. And with the addition of these nodes, which were also, as you can see, CNC cut, the whole thing came together. And so my thought with this lecture was that I would try and show photos of how I make things, and also so as to like demystify the process. But then I don't know, I want to encourage people who are just graduated or about to graduate to consider a more DIY approach to architecture. When I was a student, it seemed that I didn't have very many options. I didn't really think too hard about it, honestly. I wasn't a super pessimistic person. I kind of am now, unfortunately, but I wasn't that pessimistic when I was in undergrad. And I imagined I could be a slave for a famous architect. I could be reasonably well paid for a bad architect, or God would intervene in some major way with some, profound Medici-like patron. And the last thing just seemed totally out of my control. So it seemed like the options were a little bit bleak. So, um, hmm. So anyways, I'm like kind of proof that that there's other ways to like make architecture. It seemed like a lot of my friends or students or young professionals, the thing they wanted to do more than anything in the world was to start an office, was to quote unquote have their own office. This is a very small, trivial thing to point this out, but I wasn't really interested in starting an office. I was interested in building buildings. And you don't, I don't know. I think anybody can kind of start an office. My cousin's cat can start an office. He can just, have a website with some drawings and say, that if you want to start an office, use the phrase we. It implies you have a team of 10 people and you have cash coming. I don't know, it's very strange. So I just wasn't really concerned about starting an office. I was just concerned about making buildings. Um, I welcome the idea of a partner and working together with other people, but I don't know, it just didn't really happen for me. So or it hasn't happened yet. Um Basically, I'm an impatient person and I don't like to wait. Anyways, I tell uh people that like, never turn down like any project. Um no matter how cheap or how ridiculous, at least don't turn it down right away because you never know. This was uh my first project, it's kind of my only commissioned project, I guess. I designed a kitchen for my friend's mom. And I designed a kitchen for my friend's friend. Um, those were like strictly for cash. So this is kind of like this was kind of the only project that I ever got that involved a client asking me for architectural services. And uh I was really fortunate. I I don't know if anybody watched the Pokemon series, but I think it's during the first episode when Ash Ketchum embarks on his quest to catch all the Pokemon. He sees in the distance this like rare bird. It's not Zapdos, it's some other like rare bird. And I don't know, it's just this gift from the universe. So this was really a gift from the universe, honestly. There's something in the chat. Let me read it. Ho-Oh. I don't know. Is that the name of the Pokemon? Maybe it is. Anyways, I hope that's a Pokemon reference. I don't know what that's a reference to. Okay, whatever. But this was really a gift from the universe, and it hasn't happened since then. But it happened right when somebody needs a little bit of confidence. That is about 2 years after I graduated undergraduate. Um, so anyways, this is a ADU, but I had the good fortune of it being an ADU that faced an alley. And so I basically knew that the construction on the inside was going to be as cheap as humanly possible. So I designed three sides of a box to be vaguely Le Corbusier-esque, and then I designed a facade. And I had the thought that I could probably build the facade entirely on my own and very inexpensively, which turned out to be the case. Um, the three sides of this box are wrapped in gray stucco, and it cost the stucco company $18,000 to wrap these three sides of the house in stucco. And I charged the client for the materials to build this white facade $10,000. How I came up with that $10,000 figure was the client called me one day when I was in the car and he asked me how much it was going to cost. And I quickly looked online to see how much plywood sheets at Home Depot cost. And I multiplied it by like 100. And then I added like 5,000 for fiberglass. And then I had like some kind of, $3,000, um, you know, for extras. And I think and I guess I thought that I'd get paid around $3,000, the fiberglass and the plywood, and then I'd walk away with about $3,000 for maybe a couple months worth of work. I think in the end, I probably ended up spending around 11 or $12,000, and it took about 5 months of work. Um, so I worked for 5 months for free, and then I paid $2,000. But yeah, this is, I guess, the price that I paid. Ruskin describes the seven lamps of architecture. And the first lamp is the lamp of sacrifice. He says that architecture is a sacrifice. Um, it's a financial sacrifice, it's a labor sacrifice, it's it's an offering of yourself to God. Um, hmm. I don't know why God would want this, but hmm, it's probably a little better than me just sitting around, watching TV. Okay, so how was it made? Well, I wanted it to look like the Villa Stein and Robert Venturi's Vana Venturi house, the house for his mother. I love the Villa Stein. I love the absolute flat graphic planarity of the front facade. And then, of course, Robert Venturi has this idea that modern architecture, which is about abstract shapes and formalisms, is not enough. We need to actually symbolically refer to, what houses look like. So here we see this flat planar facade, which is all geometrically composed based off of the golden rectangle and so forth. This is a square. The center of the square has this circle. This line carries across here. These two marks are actually dead center in the middle of this whole composition. So it has this seemingly picturesque appearance of this strange house. And yet all of these lines, this line, this line, this line, has to do with some sort of like geometric principle, which I suppose, have the time to go into other than what I just said. But how is it constructed? So it was constructed entirely out of plywood. I loved making models when I was a student, and I think that a lot of the building industry is somewhat untouchable in terms of basic framing techniques and flooring techniques and sheetrock, etc. These are just kind of best practices that probably aren't going to change for a very long time. But in the form of facades or ceilings or wall treatments, or basically added at the moment for me non-structural applique, there is a lot of room for creativity and the expertise that I think most architects, or at least very ambitious architects, are naturally given after completing a professional degree in architecture. If you can make a model of a certain degree of sophistication and precision, you can probably make a piece of architecture. So this is these are two panels that compose the whole. This is another panel. This is a detail of another panel. All of these pieces were CNC cut at one of those public build shops. I got a membership for 1 month that cost me $100. And over the course of 5 really brutal days, I CNC cut something like 80 or 90 sheets of plywood. I was not only cutting the pieces that you see here, which compose like the front applique, but the internal structure of all of these panels is made of like an interstitial waffle structure, ribs spaced, I think, 16 inches on center. And so as long as I obeyed my laptop computer and made sure that the edges were nice and square, hypothetically, these panels would go together uh, pretty easily on site. So here's a look at that top piece, which kind of looks like a chimney. This was the truck I had at the time, and one of these panels, what here was, I think, 14 feet. And so I would, my parents are divorced, so I would build the panels in my mom's driveway, and then I'd put them in my truck and I'd drive them across town to my dad's driveway and I'd store them in my dad's driveway. And that was kind of the process. So here we are taking more panels. Here we are storing them in my dad's driveway. And all of the pieces were, as I said, assembled out of CNC cut plywood. And then it was important that they were then sealed with a layer of fiberglass. And when people see the house at first glance, they kind of assume that it was stucco, but it would have been nearly impossible to translate with anything vaguely resembling the Rhino model into the like on-site construction and maintain these super crisp lines here, and also maintain again the geometric play of surfaces. So it had to be CNC cut with a computer, and then the final pieces had to be fiberglassed in order to preserve all of these crisp edges. Here's the more or less week of assembly. I had at this point sold my car, my truck, because I didn't need it anymore. And so I took a train, and I slept in this house for a week, kind of like bathing in the bathroom of a Starbucks, essentially. And by bathing, I mean brush my teeth, and then sleeping in a sleeping bag. And it was winter, and California is very mild, but even winters can be, pretty chilly at night. So anyways, I slept in this house for about a week while this was getting constructed. And all of these panels that you see here, we were able to lift ourselves with ropes and just proverbial manpower. But then this panel and the panel beside it needed to be lifted with an actual crane, these two here. And so the crane guy charged us something like $300 an hour. But he showed up, set up his crane, and craned these two in place in about 20 minutes. I don't remember if he prorated us for the hour, but he was in and out. And, in anticipation, I'm thinking, oh, the crane, the crane, the crane, this is going to be some extremely important thing. And it wasn't. So here's a photo that I really like with my mom in the middle. And you can very clearly see the edges where one panel meets the other. And this used to bother me. And I think for a while, actually, on my website, the photos of this house, I had photoshopped the seams out and made it look like I made it perfectly. And then, a little while later, I realized that that was really stupid and that you should just show it. Also, I think there's a slight mystery to how this was made. Again, it's not stucco. It might look like steel. If you look at a oil tanker, a ship, it's composed of thick plates of steel, but the weld joints are not perfect. it's not a perfectly planar situation. It wobbles and is warped and, kind of looks like this. This was another project. It was kind of a commission, but not really. My dad is an architect in Oakland, California, and he co-owns a very small building with his business partner. And Oakland, California, the real estate is quite lucrative. And so currently they have this large parking lot. And so they had this idea of getting rid of the parking lot, adding 3 or 4 apartment units, and then putting a new facade over the entire thing, and then preserving his office. And so this was an idea that I had for that project. It was a very facade-based project here. And I was interested in curves and hyper-technical architectural expression. But I had a brief visit to China and Japan, and that kind of opened my eyes to the realm of ornament and figuration, and mostly how the figure of a dragon would present itself with a mouth and teeth and things like that, but at the same time blend seamlessly into the roof structures of like temples with these sinuous S curves and things like that. So I thought there was a very beautiful harmony between like the overall form of these roofs coupled with ornamentation and things like that. So I brought that to this project. This is a earlier project that didn't go anywhere, unfortunately. And I combined that with a very classic architectural strategy these days. This is a Jimmy John's in Brookings, South Dakota, where I used to teach. And it was always like an example of course, bad architecture, because it is a single building. It is a single construction, but rather than look like this, implacable modern monumental thing, this single shape, it is instead composed of these, undulating pavilions which bump in and out, and they kind of quote unquote break down the scale of the facade. Anyways, this is a common trait in the kind of generic pseudo-modern architecture you see these days, breaking down the scale of the thing. And so I imagined this facade as composed of 3 or 4 different parts, which would project and overlap on top of each other. And they would have these very simple vertical lines here, which would define the various projections, which would kind of kink back and forth across the facade. And then I would simply add these little bits of applique here. So I saw this facade as extremely geometric and relatively simple to construct. But when properly adorned, it would have this very fluid appearance. So I never built it, but I'm just going to go through a few of the process images that I like. This is one of these earlier instances of these series of, undulating volumes or bay windows lapped on top of each other. Why it looks like this, I couldn't exactly say. It looks like a series of bags. I thought this was kind of a breakthrough. I couldn't exactly tell you why, but I just had like a very wonderful, like tingly feeling about it. I just loved this gesture here of an arch and then an inverted arch on top of it, and then this pinching gesture. Everything else just was kind of fluff, but I loved this like central gesture here. So that blossomed into this drawing that you see here, which, you know, defines this idea I just explained earlier about these relatively simple projecting vertical masses, which are then adorned on the edges. And here you can see those projections here with then these tiny little sculptural appliques happening on the bottom. Here's that detail that I really like. This was a slightly more fine-grained version of that same drawing. But sometimes I get lost in the kind of excess and the virtuoso of a drawing, and you can very easily lose sight of the whole. By the way, what exactly is all this stuff? It's clearly eyes and mouths and, you know, orifices. Why exactly it is that way, I couldn't exactly say, but why is Gaudi the way that it is? I couldn't exactly say either. So I figure if Gaudi could do it, I could do it as well. I was teaching studio at the time, like I said, in South Dakota. And so here were some really interesting studio projects from some of my students. And though I was a perfectionist as a student, I've really enjoyed being a teacher because it's allowed me to get messy and not directly because I didn't make these, but suggest that students get messy. And I think getting messy is something that certainly my undergraduate and graduate school kind of lacked. One needs to have precision when it comes time for the final execution, but when your mind is, you know, blank and casual and relaxed, and you can put shapes together in this intuitive, messy way, formal possibilities just open up. These are, of course, like pseudo-architectural sculptural pieces that these students made, and they're quite beautiful. This one was set on fire for the photograph. So I was really inspired by that casualness of this like kind of student work and working with students and working with crumpled paper and just making quick sketches. So this really belabored kind of try hard perfectionist thing, I went back and I revised it and I edited it down quite a bit so that the final composition looked something like this. Far less ornamental applique, far more, let's say, purity in the overall partie, which could be very, very simply described as, you know, a curtain that's being lifted up and pulled away, although that certainly doesn't describe it in its entirety. I think it's important to have parties that are clear like that, but that you get down to the nuance of the thing and you make it more than that. There's also a play of scale happening as this tiny arch here, which is completed, goes to this incompleted medium-sized arch, and then goes to this very large, totally incompleted arch here. So the building is kind of ascending in scale, and it's ascending literally across the facade from left to right. This is the computer translation of that drawing. And then this was the final outcome. I had a meeting with my dad and his business partner about this, and he said, "Why do you want to do all this?" And I said, "Because I want to be in a magazine or something. I want to do something that matters." And that was the honest to God truth. That was all I could say about it. I wanted it to be in a magazine. And he thought it was completely idiotic what I proposed. And I don't exactly blame him because it's his money, and God only knows how complicated this would have been to build. So it goes. This is the next project. It's a small shed. This was a tool shed that my dad asked me to build. And he said, I've got $1,500 for you. You can do what you like with it. And as long as you build it under a certain footprint, we won't need to get permits or anything like that. So he put in $1,500, and then I put in about $1,500 of my own money for the steel. And using the plasma cutter that South Dakota State had at the time, I was able to make all this ornamental truss work that you see here. The party diagram of the thing is extremely straightforward. It's a small little box with an oversized roof on top. This is a house by the architect Bernard Maybeck. He's a Bay Area architect. And this is a classic trope in the history of architecture, but it's a very common thing in Bay Area and kind of Maybeck style houses where the roof is split into these two separate eaves. And this was kind of important because I set myself slightly outside of the present day camp of postmodern revivalists who are obsessed with houses that look like houses with little monopoly roofs on them. And that's because the fixation for me is so obviously, at least in my opinion, not the straightforward monopoly roof, but in a classic architectural sense is all of the tectonic minutia of how the thing comes together. And I feel like the first reading of my architecture, which happens to have a pitched roof, is not a kind of pitched roof monopoly architecture, but is the kind of tectonic language of the truss and the structure and so on. Also, of course, Japanese temples. These are some origin drawings. The previous project had no real, let's say, ornamental basis, but this project, because it was a shed, like a tool shed, at a little cabin where we like to camp, and it's near a river. I was inspired by imagery of like fish and bats and birds and very naturalistic things. And so I imagined it somewhat like a Chinese temple with dragons as a Chinese temple with bats and birds and fish and things like that. So this was the kind of final version of what I had originally drawn. And I had really imagined this extremely ridiculous construction made out of probably fiberglass and steel and God knows what. And all of a sudden, it was time to build the thing, and I had to radically simplify my idea. But I think that this drawing was an important drawing for me. I think probably it led to other things, and I think probably distilled down in this very basic way, the presence of it is, evident in the final thing. So here's some construction images. This project, I will pridefully admit was built almost entirely by myself. I had a little bit of help with painting and staining. And the doors, which you'll see, were very heavy. So my dad helped me hang these doors. I say that, of course, partially to brag because I'm a human being, but I say that also because nobody's, well, I don't know what's going to happen in your life. Maybe your life will be very different than mine. Probably it will, because everybody's life is different. But nobody has really asked me to do much of anything. Everything that I've done, which has been artistic, aesthetically meaningful, has been the result of my own like passion and devotion to the thing, without like money or profit kind of guiding me. Um, I don't know. I want the thing. It's back to this like materialistic drive that I have. I want to be inside of it. I want to build it. I want to see it. I just want to like, if I could take all of my, buildings and kind of shrink them and like carry them around with me, I would. I've saved like every single model I've made, and my wife insists that I throw them out, but I just won't. I'm just too attached to them. They're like precious. Um, so here's a picture of all of the steel components. Um, I think if the parts are beautiful, then the overall architecture will be beautiful. I think if the parts are not beautiful, the architecture probably won't look beautiful. I very much like to see a big pile of parts, and I hope that they look beautiful. This is a picture of a model that I made during my 4th year at architecture school. Tom Main's models at Morphosis are very real. They're very concrete. Um, and I liked that about them. And so I don't know, my models possessed that same quality. This is not just simply a laser cut piece of paper. It's a laser cut piece of paper that was painted gray. And then it has a thinner piece of laser cut paper that was painted silver. And then it has a laser cut part here that receives this um, plastic 3D print in the middle. And here you see a staircase going through. And here you can see that even though this is very small pieces of paper, there's actually like spray painted basswood structure and columns inserted through the whole thing. And so I've been making quite literally miniature buildings all throughout school. And the translation or the transition from student to practicing architect was almost seamless, because rather than simply laser cutting the thing out of paper at 1/32 inch scale, I laser cut the thing out of steel at full scale. This is a picture of the door, which was CNC cut, and the whole thing shredded, and it was kind of a CNC disaster. It didn't look like I wanted it to look, and the thing splintered, and I was really depressed, honestly. And rather than try and preserve this perfect thing, I decided to make it look like I had gone at it with a hatchet. And so I would make it look weathered and dirty and imperfect. So when we look at the final photo, it'll look like that. Here's a picture of the welded components. Most architecture, certainly kind of residential architecture, I just noticed there's a deer in this picture, can be built by, I think, one person or certainly two people. So that's kind of important. This was all built just by myself. And here's that door with its distressed quality. This is the next project. I'll just like rush through these because I want to just talk about the project in Christiansburg. But this was a basement for a house that I was working on. It was very much inspired by this Art Nouveau artist. His name is Aubrey Beardsley. And I love the contrast of black and white and, paper thin lines and things like that. And then it was also Le Corbusier's studio. I love this barrel vault, which is then impossibly floating in space. I just thought that was the cleverest gesture I could possibly imagine. A barrel vault is supposed to be supported by heavy masonry, and here Le Corbusier has it magically floating. And so I wanted to have that quality. I wanted to have a barrel vaulted ceiling that magically floats. So here we see this process of mine, which involves 3D modeling and pencil sketching back and forth. Here's an image of the barrel vaulted ceiling, which is very straightforward, like OSB CNC cut and then 2x4s. And then here you can see how we made the edge. This is a small piece of steel, which was welded in a, waffle-like fashion to create this component. And then there's a final layer of mud, which kind of unifies the whole. So here we see the vaulted ceiling and then the steel piece. Here we see more of the vaulted ceiling, which has plumbing and electrical and things like that. And then more of the steel piece. Here we see various components coming into play. The ceiling is almost done here with this 1/4-inch drywall, this kind of floating angel in the back, and then this arm. Now the head and the ceiling has this texture, which is then blended into the steel so that the gap between the steel and the sheetrock goes away. And then here is the nearly completed thing. Here is a zoomed in view of it under construction. I really like it. It's a 3-dimensionalized version of an Aubrey Beardsley drawing. Here's the sheetrock and the steel being joined together. Here's a close-up picture of the waffle grid and this fireplace centerpiece. These tabs were laser cut, and then this is called a plug weld when you weld something from the front, and so it was all plug welded. This made it very easy to assemble because I was able to stand on it with my body weight to contort it to the shape and then just plug weld it from the front. And then the plug weld became part of the ornamentation of the thing. Here's one of those side pieces, a look at what that is like and how it bolted to the ceiling structure. Here's more of those side pieces. Here's a rendered view of the thing. And then here's another close-up detail of the thing. Here's the exterior of that same house. It was a very generic double-hipped roof. And I wanted it to be infused with the same spirit of the basement. I did the basement first, thinking that if I failed, I would at least, not hurt the house. And I was full of confidence after I did the basement. So then I started designing the rest of the thing. This is Fujin Raijin, famous Japanese block print. I originally thought that the exterior would look something like this. That is a very straightforward double hip roof, which then magically becomes this frothing series of surfaces with, for some reason, a naked woman thing in the middle. I genuinely thought I was going to build this. I mean, I don't know where I get this confidence from, but as I was drawing this, I felt very, very confident this was going to get built. Similar to the shed project, all of a sudden I had about 2 months to build the thing, and I just took it and, for all intents and purposes, took and just crumpled the paper and threw it away and built something much simpler. So here's some construction pictures of the inside. I had a very radical idea for this space as well, which then had to be simplified into this very sober composition. And then here's a picture of that exterior. I was terrified that I would damage the house or ruin its value. And so I started, and rather than edit the front, I decided to edit the back. And so here we see this new truss structure. I call these trusses, these little triangles, which compose the new tilt. This dormer, which has been kind of released from its subordinate position, kind of midway on the roof, and is now taking the climax of the roof. Frank Lloyd Wright always said, I don't want to build on the top of a hill. I want to build on the middle of a hill. This is saying, I want to build on the top of the hill. So that's that. I have some pictures of the house that I've been most recently working on of the exterior, which I quite like. But I do not yet have photos of the interior, which I like all that much. Nevertheless, I will share some process pictures of the interior and some more or less finished pictures of the exterior. This is a house in Christiansburg. I uh did this last house as a renovation and then sold it. This was a house that I actually lived in, so it's technically a flip, and I made a little bit of profit on it. And so when I started the next house, I was once again just like brimming with confidence, and I thought I would build it in a year. I thought I'd build it for $300,000. I thought I'd sell it for 400,000. I'd make a ton of money and everybody would love it and all this and that. It turns out it took 3 years to build. It cost 500,000, and sadly, ladies and gentlemen, nobody wanted to buy it. This turns out to be not the worst thing in the world, because that means that my family and I are going to move into it, at least for some unknown period of time. But anyways, the house looks like this. It's quite cool. I'm kind of thinking that I probably should have just talked about this house, but so it goes. This is a picture of the roof. It's very much an extension of the Bay Area Maybach style that I was exploring earlier in the shed, but you know, amplified to this, gargantuan monumental scale. There's a similar relationship with all of this decorative steel work and decorative woodwork. And the overall appearance is multifaceted. I think the roof reminds me of an airplane. I think the circle windows and submarine windows remind me of something nautical. I think the kind of scaffolding like incompleteness of the project reminds me of something that's barn like. And then I think the overall composition is very modern, very severe, very symmetrical. So there's a lot going on. This basic gesture here of the central square comes from a Le Corbusier house in Paris. This is a picture of a shed, a storehouse. This is a picture of Palladio's San Giorgio Maggiore, this play of scale and the severity of this front facade. This is a picture of the ridge condition on a typical like terracotta Japanese or Chinese roof. And all of these things, in my opinion, are playing into like the overall composition and idea of the house. This is a villa by the architect Giacomo della Porta, and the house is kind of competing with the hillside for scale. You very much get the sense that this house was not to be viewed close up, but was to be viewed from afar. And so rather than having this relatively humble size plan, which would be more or less square or rectangular, the plan is then stretched like a Venturi billboard. And to emphasize the fact that it's stretched, the pediment is broken. And when it's stretched, it also becomes very thin because the overall gesture of the house is one of grandiosity, of this gargantuan scale. This is the Trevi Fountain with this like overly rusticated base. This is Mount Vernon, Washington's home, with this lovely lantern top. This is Bernard Maybeck's Boak House in Berkeley. This is Herzog de Meuron's plywood house somewhere in Switzerland. This is the dome of St. Ivo. This is a B-17 bomber from World War II. This is the turret of a B-17 bomber from World War II. And all of these images were a constant focus or obsession for the house, and played into the final composition. So here's some construction photos. Here's this white plywood stain. Here's more of the white plywood stain. Here's this roof construction with these large eaves. Here's this exoskeleton with this facade, like the Giacomo della Porta example, which is stretched to make the frontal appearance of the house about 50% larger than it actually should be. These are eventually infilled with panels. Here's a zoomed in picture of the truss work. More of that. Here is Washington's little dome from Mount Vernon, albeit more World War II-like and a little bit smaller. This is, however, big enough to climb through. This is the inside. We're going to just take like a tour of the inside. This is a central dome in the middle of the house. There's a lot about the house which is expanding left and right. You may have noticed the gesture of the roofs, which kind of pile on top of each other, one on top of the other. So there's this, east-west expansion, but then there's also this up and down vertical ascension because the whole house is connected with this three-story, semi-dome structure. So here's the entryway, and here's the dome. Here is a nearly completed photo of this interior space. It's still kind of under construction in this photo. Here is the main living space. We're underneath the three-story dome, of course. And I very much wanted the inside to feel like a church. And so here you see this altar, you see these stepping aisles, suggesting that this is the kind of main axis of the quote-unquote church space, though it's the short axis. Here we see this very conservative or traditional woodwork having this nice dialogue with this strange contemporary dome. This is the second floor. Now we've gone up a set of stairs and we see this like faint impression of the dome, which is inaccessible on the second floor, but we see its, presence here in this little space. Here we see the dome once more. This is what I imagine to be like a child's room with this small little, bonus space back here that's scaled for a child. Here is just a composition of, I think, kind of Japanese style woodwork and plaster. And then here's the master bedroom, where you can see the dome penetrates the floor and then finally penetrates the ceiling here. And then up above this is where you have that small little Mount Vernon lantern thing. So Here we just have a little bit more of the woodwork and the plaster. And I wanted to now just focus a little bit on the construction of the dome. Here is the mold. Here are a series of leaves which compose the overall thing. Here's a zoomed in detail of that. This is a picture of the terminus of the dome. This is all double curvature here, so it could only be made out of fiberglass. However, as we'll see in a minute, the dome terminates with this steel construction, which is all single curvature. And so it's basically a continuation of like technical experiments that I'd made with the basement project, but now no longer in a barrel vault, but in this kind of three-dimensional dome setting. So here we see the dome and then these steel add-ons, which are creating this like decorative terminus. Here we see like all of the steel add-ons together. And this is from the master bedroom peering down into this engine space. It's kind of like an engine transmission. This is like the heart of the house. This is the dome still being like surfaced and painted and things like that. This is my now building partner, Mitch Minford, who was like instrumental. This was also, for the record, of course, built by Mitch Minford, myself, and about 20 Virginia Tech students, most of which are on this call: Seth, Mitchell, Signey, Joe, Alonzo, Ian. This has been like a massive effort. And so students that were working on this project had a somewhat atypical, quote unquote, summer internship where instead of building models, they were, staining wood, making crazy sculptural things. This is another photo of the dome in its nearly completed state with this, I think of it as just a modern version of a chandelier. This is what it looks like at night with only one light on and this very strange pattern that's cast on the floor. And then this is a photo looking up the dome now. And then this is the project that I'm working on. It's yeah, I don't know what to say about it other than it's very different from what I've been working on. So I went on for about half an hour longer than I planned on. I apologize, honestly. And if anyone has any questions or comments, I'd love to like take some.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
So you mentioned that during your undergrad years you were optimistic and then you're pessimistic now. Like what happened? Or just I don't know. What could you talk some more about that? If you wouldn't
Well,
mind.
I think I've said this before, but I think you need to come out of school or you need to um charge at the field of architecture at 10,000 miles an hour because there are so many things that are going to slow you down. Where are you going to get money? where are you going to get time to do these things? Where are you going to find friends and peers that support what you're doing and are interested in what you're doing? It takes a tremendous amount of momentum. And so when I graduated undergrad and then shortly after, well, not shortly after, but 4 years later, graduated from graduate school, I think both of those times I had quite a bit of momentum and enthusiasm and an almost insane, incredible amount. And when I say I'm slightly pessimistic, I think maybe my, rate of 10,000 miles an hour has just been slowed down to a somewhat more, um, expected pace. I mean, it's really tough. You constantly ask yourself why you're spending all this time and money doing these things when very, very, in the grand scheme of things, very few people care about it. And there's the difficulty of the thing itself. And then there's also the just kind of existential stupidity of it as well. And so those things weigh heavy on a person. And only individuals with idiot-like optimism and confidence can kind of survive, I think, and not be brought down by whatever. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just reading Frank Lloyd Wright's biography right now, his autobiography. It's an amazing work, by the way. Frank Lloyd Wright is not only, an architect, but he's very literary. He's a wonderful writer. And everyone criticizes Wright for this, insane egotistical self-confidence. But I think the field, short of some kind of miraculous intervention or, genuinely collaborative effort, which is the product of 5 or 6 or whatever people working together, short of that kind of thing, it really requires that. Otherwise, you kind of lose steam after a little while. But good question.
I have a question.
Yes.
Well, I feel like one of the things that always stood out to me with you, Ben, is sort of, your taste in things and the things that you like and the things that you dislike. And I was wondering if you could put to words, you know, how you come, how you encompass that, or
You mean
I don't know.
other architecture precedents and other things? I, mm, I don't know. The architecture that I like is very, 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 very traditional. Um, I I worship the basic canon of architecture. Um, I think Rem Koolhaas is, you know, a Christ-like figure, among us mere mortals. The same for Gary, the same for Le Corbusier, the same for all of the architectural greats. So I have never had this um uh uh I think the word is like incredulous, skeptical um attitude towards the history of architecture. I've just always been in love with it. And I started viewing the world through my love of architecture. I always hated history in high school and then in undergrad, but I fell in love with architectural history, and then I fell in love with the history of cities. And then I fell in love with the history of course, predominantly the men who made those cities what they are, and that, you know, inspired, biography and just other works of like literary fiction and um I don't know. Any I think if you have a I think if you have a good taste in any medium, um, you will invariably be attracted to, high quality things in other mediums, be it clothes or cars or airplanes or something. There is such a thing as a beautiful airplane, and there is such a thing as an ugly airplane. And why I like the airplane that I mentioned, boils down to just the perhaps like indescribable nuance of just familiarizing yourself with aesthetics and things like that.
That's great. Thanks.
Hey Ben, I'm I have a question.
Yes.
I missed the first half. Um, I think it was the first half. Was commuting home from my job, but and if this is a stupid question, you don't have to answer it. But
Okay.
I'm currently um doing the Amber Book stuff, studying for,
Yes.
and I'm curious about how you um I guess reconcile the technical and more, I don't know. Yeah, I guess the technical aspects of architecture and the practice itself with the structural and kind of figurative, yeah, aspects of it. And how do you ever find yourself having to take or sacrifice one or the other? And how do you look at that? From a,
No, I've never felt like I couldn't build something. Even that ridiculous facade that had all of the curves on it and the naked woman. Um, I really did have a plan about how I was going to do that. And I really think, as I said, it boils down to the models that I made in school. I think some students are overly ambitious about models, and they make a model that they plan to make a model that they just can't make well. And I never I never made a model that was so complicated that it couldn't be made well. Um, when I was a second year, all the models that I made were boxes. When I was a third year, all the models that I made were um, slightly more than boxes. When I was in my fourth year, and it just kind of progressed, and I feel like I never took on something that couldn't be executed with care. Um, and I don't really feel like my projects are value engineered. I mean, I guess with the exception of the, well, I don't know. I can't really imagine a more expensive version of the Christiansburg house. I can't imagine the project I'm working on right now. I can't really imagine a more expensive version of this thing you're looking at now. I'm not really, I don't really care about some nebulous, non-existent, more expensive version of it. I only care about what I can build. This isn't helpful what I'm saying. I'm sorry, but
mm-mm.
I'm just like honestly uh thinking about it and describing my experience. But I did mention with a couple of projects that I could go back. Uh it started with the first house that I did the structure was extremely simple, and we actually had a legitimate contractor build the structure, and all I did was the facade. And so that meant that the waterproofing would be taken care of, the structure of the house would be taken care of. And if I blew it somehow, it wouldn't be an existential issue for like the, stability of the house. And that was an example where like the architecture and the banal quote unquote like building or the boring part, there was a very clear line between where those were. The architecture is here, the facade, and then the boring buildings over here. And over the years I've just been kind of pushing that line a little bit further. And so in the case of this house, all of the living space is contained in a very simple 2x6 framed house. It just looks like this. It's identical to any other piece of construction. However, there is a structurally interesting moment, but it only occurs in the porch here. And towns have a little bit more leeway when it comes to exterior porch space. And so they're a little bit more, liberal with, the structural, situation. So long as the interior space is very straightforward. So
Yeah, I'm curious about the permitting. Like, what was there any pushback from? I don't know
the
what the
permitting,
Christianville.
the permitting with this was very simple. I put together a drawing set that was composed of 7 or 8 pages, and it didn't go into too much detail. It was a little bit beyond what a student would make probably for a final presentation, and it had dimensions and things like that. And the town of Christiansburg, for all intents and purposes, approved it in about 2 days. So I submitted the drawing set, and 2 days later it was approved. And I didn't have any engineering for this house because the entire interior space was uh, built or designed using what's called quote unquote prescriptive design. So all the joists and headers and um, uh, you know shear panels were following the basic tables that are very clearly outlined in the IRC. It turns out when the inspector came out to see the project, he was a little bit alarmed by the porch. He was a little bit alarmed by a couple of things. So I had to go back retroactively and get an engineer to stamp what I had already built. But it was a relatively painless process. And the town of Christiansburg was very lenient about it. But yeah, I'm describing like factually what happened. I have to say I was in a great state of like emotional turmoil because I always imagined at some point the town of Christiansburg or whomever would blow up my house um and condemn it and say that it was unlivable or something. That never happened. But I'd always feared that that would happen. The fact of the matter is it was pretty straightforward. And again, I think the overall aesthetic of it, which is interesting from our point of view, I think frankly also communicated a level of like competence to the inspector. Things were well made. Things were plumb. Things were the project had just an overall level of kind of perfectionism, and in spite of its very strange appearance, uh I think the inspector uh couldn't really call me uh a total fraud idiot who
Mhm.
didn't know what I was doing or whatever.
That's it. Thank you.
I have a question. So, obviously, you've walked us through kind of a journey through uh, figuring out what it is that you're obsessed with, and I've been thinking a lot recently about like the different like stages of like an artist's career or an architect's career, like they all of the types of paintings that great painters made, but they're all so different, but they kind of led to the next thing. And like Picasso's blue period, then all of the more abstract cubist stuff. So I guess my question for you is like, do you think that you are kind of still looking for something, or have you found it, or are you on the on the edge of something, or where do you see your work now? What are you like obsessed with right now? Where do you think it's going? Because the next house, like you've told me before, is like kind of the opposite of this. It's more modern, it's sleek. It's more, it's like a blank canvas of some kind. It's like a TV, and those are very kind of that's a very like opposite description of what this house is. So I'm interested in like an artist's trajectory. Like where do you think you are in your timeline?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have a very like insecure ego that um wants to make original things, um so that people like me and things like that. Um but as I like started to talk, um I think what truly does drive me more than anything else is just this inexplicable. I have to have this thing that you're looking at right now. I want it. It's like a car. I just want this. I was listening to um Steve Wozniak talking about the early days of Apple, and he said that he really wanted a computer. He said he'd give anything in the world to have a computer. Um, he had heard that when he's a teenager, the first um, the first, I don't know if it was even a home computer at that point, but like the first kind of somewhat smallish computer would have cost as much as a house. And he said, that's worth it to me. I want a computer that bad. And so when the timing was right and the technology was available for Steve Wozniak to build his first computer, what drove him more than anything is just this beautiful childlike thing. He just wanted that computer. He wanted that computer so, so bad. He had to have it. And he couldn't afford the computers that were on the market. And he also, let's see, he couldn't afford the computers that were on the market. And the computers that were on the market weren't exactly what he wanted, anyways. And so he had no choice but to build it himself. And uh yeah, you on YouTube you can see and I can't remember if we talked about it in class, but um you can see people living in I don't know if they're third world countries, but um not particularly affluent countries. Um and and these people are making like imitation Porsches, and they're getting steel and they're getting tires and they're getting their mother to, sew the leather seats, and they're making steering wheels out of whatever. You on YouTube, you can find this kind of stuff. Or you can see DIYers who make their own Ferrari. And it's an ugly Ferrari and it's not perfect, but it's theirs. And I don't think they're doing it for the applause on YouTube. I think they're doing it because they genuinely want to have a Ferrari. And they want it, and they can't afford a Ferrari, but they just want to have the thing. And so I don't know. I can't exactly explain why, because I'm not particularly obsessed necessarily with living in these houses, although it just so happens I am going to live in the one that we just talked about. But it just like I want to be inside of it. I want to know what it's like. And I want to know what it's like to be Rem Koolhaas or Le Corbusier, to walk around an incompleted building that that you've designed, that I'm not willing to wait for somebody to give that to me. But to your question, more specifically, I mean, yeah, I saw Elon Musk's Tesla truck and I was just like, that's it,
It might be.
like this is just that's it. That's I mean, all other cars just look like a joke. And you have seen like a whole bunch of cars lately in the last year that look kind of like a Tesla truck. They're not like exact imitations, of course, but I think that look has had like a big influence. And it's just like the car of the future. It's like, I want a Tesla truck. I want the house of the future. I want like a Tesla house. I just want it. And you know, um, the shed project and the project in Christiansburg, as you pointed out, they look very antique, and they look kind of like 19th century um, uh, projects, kind of with a little bit of ornamental applique here and there that looks kind of high tech. In this case, I wanted something that for whatever reason, I want something that's streamlined. I want it to look modern. I want it to look brand new. I want it to look from the future. Yeah, I was I was kind of sick of drawing kind of temple-like projects with pitched roofs, and I wanted to have a Le Corbusier project of my own, or a Daniel Libeskind project of my own. I can't afford to hire Daniel Libeskind, and I don't have a client like Daniel Libeskind would have, so I just kind of take it upon myself to do it. And yeah, it just kind of whatever feels right. I am terrified what the next project will look like, because I feel like I have no ideas. I literally have no idea what I'll do after this. Fortunately, I'm not too worried, because I think this project is probably going to take 5 years. This project's going to take 5 years, y'all. The last project took 3 years. This project's twice the size, and it's big, and it's kind of complicated. It's probably going to take 5 years. So I've got 5 years to figure out what I'm going to do next. Stanley Kubrick made something like 9 or 10 movies. You don't have to have too many ideas. I think it's just about having an idea that's pretty good. It might not be monumental, but pretty good, and just seeing it to its conclusion.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
Like these projects get bigger, you've had such control over the craft of the project and constructing it. I mean, you're literally building the house. But as the dreams or projects get bigger and badder, how do you imagine yourself in that construction process, if you are, and how do you imagine carrying such a level of complex geometries when you begin, having more people in that construction process? And then the other question is, you're talking about these ideas throughout the whole presentation, and I think we all understand them because we're in the world of architecture, but how do you talk about these ideas to, like, in layman's terms, to, your client or your boss, I guess, since some of us are working, or like, anyone outside of the world of architecture?
Well, a, a lot of people like Frank Gehry's architecture, because of very simple words. It's fun, it's exciting, um, it's silly. Um, there is such a thing as art house film, like Andy Warhol art house film. And, general people don't like art house film. I don't like art house films. I like blockbuster movies. I like National Treasure and the Pirates of the Caribbean. They're fun movies. Um, so um, I've been using the religious metaphor a lot, church architecture, to describe the most recent house, and everybody gets that. And if you have very conservative tastes, you probably like church architecture, so you might get that analogy. But I have tried to deliver. I don't try to do anything. I do what I want to do, and then it is the way that it is. But I think that the projects deliver a certain base level, or maybe slightly beyond base level, of comfort and daylight and um, warmth in, like, materials. And then so whatever aspect of it that's avant-garde is stomachable, or whatever, like a pill. So yeah, I don't really worry too much about talking about or explaining the stuff, because I don't have any clients. I would love to have clients. And I think just talking to them in the simplest way possible. The White House, actually, I did kind of give them a lesson in architectural history, actually. I explained Michelangelo's Porta Pia and Le Corbusier and Robert Venturi, and I treated them like intelligent people who could uh, um, make sense of what I was saying, though they didn't know anything about the history of architecture. And I think you have to give people credit, basically. If people write you off and say, "Oh, you're a total idiot, this architecture is stupid," then yeah, those people are hard to reach. I don't know how you reach those people who are going to make a snap judgment and just move on. But I think most people have a couple of minutes to hear why you did something. And most people, I think, actually have an open mind. And if your thing is of a certain quality, um, again, just like basic craftsmanship, is it straight? Is it well painted? Are the lines crooked, or are they not? So yeah, these basic things people recognize. Then your other question about the future, I pray to God that I have the problem that you described. I pray that I have to worry about that. My biggest fear is not how I'm going to solve that problem. My biggest fear is that I won't have that problem. Um, um, yeah, but I think my favorite analogy for architecture is filmmaking, or in particular, like Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick spent like 1 to 2 years writing a script, researching the subject. I'm like kind of guessing, I suppose, a certain amount of time preparing, casting actors, and then a certain amount of time shooting the thing, maybe 1 to 3 years, and then a certain amount of time editing the thing. And he was there every single step of the way, every single line of dialogue, every single light, every single piece of clothing. Every single thing gets approved by him. And again, he only made a handful of films. I think Steven Spielberg has made 20 or 30 films, maybe more. Kubrick has made, I think, under 10. And so I think I think the process will scale up. I started by making the chair myself, and then the house I made myself, the facade with a two-man crew who did the interior space. And then the house in Christiansburg was myself plus a licensed contractor plus subcontractors plus like 20 students. Like, you know, it's not exactly it's not exactly a scientific prediction, but I've proven that I can at least scale my team some modest degree, which gives me a little bit of confidence. But again, I don't worry about that too much, because if my work elevates beyond the scale of residential is going to require forces that are beyond my control. Right now I'm building houses that can be paid for by a somewhat affordable mortgage. And I got a loan from my parents that constitutes about a third of the last project. And then some of it was my own money, some of it was credit cards, some of it was a construction loan. This next project, I'm like co-invested, so it's 50% me. This is going to be my house, and this is 50% my friend, Mitch. And so, anyways, if I were to ever be involved in some kind of commercial scale work, inevitably it's going to require a straightforward, I think a relatively straightforward client-like investor who wants me to build. And again, that's just it's beyond my control, so I try not to really worry about it or think about it. Not that there's much to think about anyways. Just do this is like very cliched advice, but just do what's directly in front of you. You're making a model at work, make it the best model you've ever seen in your life. You're making a drawing or a painting at home, make it the best drawing or painting you've ever seen in your life. And then, whether somebody commissions you or you somehow have this windfall of money, that's kind of up to, something other than yourself.
Hi Ben. I have a
Stanton,
question. Yeah. Hey.
another
Uh,
builder.
it was really interesting seeing your whole process and everything with this talk. And it's very obvious that you have just stylistically speaking, um you're inspired by so many of these, the greats, as you put it, uh of architecture. I was just wondering, like, more so about the process. This is partly in part because I'm kind of struggling with sort of like my process right now, and I tend to sort of get too caught up in the process. And I was just curious about your sort of like equation within the process. You have your beautiful drawings, and then you also like model and then like it seems that primarily what you're really interested in just like is pure like building. You know, we have architects like Zaha, who was, you know, she was like primarily interested in like I guess painting, you could say, and then later on in life, she suddenly gets a commission, and then her paintings turn into architecture. Whereas with you, it seems like you know, you're purely interested in just, you know, having something physically built. So I was just curious about like what value like your drawings, which are, you know, obviously very beautiful, what value those hold, and like how does this equation play out, and then like in the grand scheme of things, how do they like dictate what the architecture looks like? What is the how does it sort of play into the whole um scheme of things?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, again, it comes down to just simply wanting it. I just, I, I imagine when I made a lot of pretty drawings, I just desperately wanted the drawing. I wanted to look at it. I wanted to make it. I wanted to eat it. I wanted the drawing. I wanted the object. I just wanted it. And so this desire to have this drawing, an ornament to my life, made me make drawings a certain way. And then the same with the models. And you know, the you know, the Rhino model that would make the physical model, the paper model or the acrylic model or the 3D printed model. I didn't really care about the Rhino model because the final product was the physical model. At my last like year or so of graduate school, I stopped caring about making renderings. Actually, I guess pretty much all of graduate school, I stopped caring about making renderings because they just weren't interesting. They had no value. To me, they didn't have any value. They I don't know whether somebody else thinks the renderings have value, but I just don't think they have value. I don't know if models have value to anybody else, but models, you know, have value to me. You know, if somebody broke into my house and smashed my models, I'd be, you know, I'd be super sad. I might cry. You know, if somebody um you know, found some rendering JPEGs and deleted them, I don't think it would be a super big loss. Um, you know, so I've always had an end product in mind. Um, I wanted to make this point. I don't really like the term experimentation. I've never thought of myself as just kind of messing around. That's partially why I enjoy teaching so much, because I feel like I'm like bearing witness to like a lot of people like experimenting with things and trying new things that I'm too afraid to try myself. And it's because I don't really like experimenting. I'm like I proceed very, very, very cautiously with you know, every kind of thing that I do because I'm terrified of failing or not finishing. And um so yeah, that was about the idea of experimentation. But again, like your point, yeah, I don't really care about process. You know, the Beatles process, Jimi Hendrix demo tapes, Beatles demo tapes, they're like vaguely interesting, um, mainly as just like historical artifacts. But you know, the cultural value, the irreplaceable thing is the final song itself. It's not the demo tape of Sergeant Pepper or whatever. It's the final version of Sergeant Pepper that, if it were magically deleted from human history, would be an unbelievable loss. You know, and in comparison, again, little, lyrics, or again, demo tapes, or little ditties here and there. It just pale in comparison, times 10 or whatever. It's kind of late. We should probably end at 9, or maybe now,
Yeah.
whatever. If
I
anybody
was
has
gonna
one more question.
I was gonna end it now.
Yeah.
I guess if someone else, never mind. We're not gonna have any more questions. Sorry. If you wanted to ask Ben one, you can just go find him at Virginia Tech. I'm sure he'll answer it.
Yes.